The Britain's Got Talent studio carried its usual Saturday evening energy as Simon Cowell settled into his judge's chair for what he anticipated would be another routine audition session. It was a crisp November day in 2024, and the familiar red curtains framed the stage where countless dreams had been both realized and shattered over the years. Simon adjusted his signature black t-shirt and checked his notes, mentally preparing himself for the evening's lineup of hopeful performers. At 64 years old, Simon had built an empire on his reputation for brutal honesty and uncompromising standards. His sharp critiques and devastating rejections had become legendary, making him one of the most feared and respected figures in entertainment. He had grown comfortable with his role as the industry's ultimate gatekeeper, the man whose approval could launch careers and whose dismissal could end dreams. He was completely unprepared for the moral reckoning that was about to unfold. 6-year-old Oliver Patterson from Liverpool was scheduled to audition with what the production notes described as an inspirational singing performance about kindness and helping others. What the notes didn't capture was that Oliver came from a family that had been discussing the ethics of entertainment industry success, particularly the morality of building careers on others' disappointment and failure. Oliver's mother, Janet Patterson, was a social worker who had been having conversations with her son about different ways people made money and whether all forms of success were equally good for society. Oliver, with the moral clarity that only children possess, had been asking penetrating questions about whether it was right to profit from others' misfortune, making his appearance on Simon's show particularly charged with ethical implications. Oliver walked onto the stage with the confident bearing of someone who genuinely believed in the message he was about to share. He was a small 6-year-old with bright red hair and intelligent green eyes that seemed to see straight through pretense to underlying truth. He wore a simple blue shirt with "Be Kind" written in colorful letters, and he carried himself with the earnest determination of someone on a mission to make the world better. "Hello there," Simon said with his usual mix of authority and slight intimidation. "What's your name, and what are you going to do for us today?" Oliver looked directly at Simon with those perceptive green eyes and spoke with the clear articulation of someone who had practiced this moment. "My name is Oliver Patterson, and I'm going to sing a song about helping people instead of hurting them." Simon raised an eyebrow at the pointed nature of Oliver's introduction. "That's an interesting choice, Oliver. What made you decide to sing about that particular topic?" Oliver's expression became more serious as he prepared to explain something that was clearly important to him. "Because my mum says that the world has too many people who make money by making other people feel bad, and not enough people who make money by making people feel good." The pointed nature of Oliver's statement wasn't lost on Simon, though he attributed it to general childhood idealism rather than a specific commentary on his own career. "That's a very mature way of thinking, Oliver," Simon replied carefully. "And what do you think about people who make money in different ways?" Oliver's answer revealed that his understanding of ethical economics was more sophisticated than anyone had anticipated. "I think people should ask themselves whether their job makes the world happier or sadder. And if it makes the world sadder, maybe they should find a different job." Simon felt a slight flutter of discomfort as Oliver's moral framework began to feel uncomfortably relevant to his own career trajectory. "That's quite a philosophy for someone your age," Simon said. "Did your parents teach you to think that way?" Oliver nodded earnestly. "My mum always asks me to think about whether the things I do help people or hurt people. She says it's the most important question anyone can ask about their life." Simon was beginning to sense that this conversation was heading toward territory that might challenge him personally, though he wasn't yet sure how. "Well, Oliver, let's hear your song then," Simon said, attempting to redirect the conversation towards safer ground. But Oliver wasn't ready to perform yet. With the persistent curiosity of childhood, he looked directly at Simon and asked a question that would completely derail the audition. "Before I sing, can I ask you something, Mr. Simon?" Simon nodded, though he felt increasingly wary of where this might lead. "My mum and I were talking about your job, and I wanted to ask you directly," Oliver said with the innocent directness that only children possess. "Are you rich because you make people sad?" The studio fell completely silent. The question hung in the air like an accusation that couldn't be unsaid. Simon felt as though he had been physically struck by the moral precision of Oliver's inquiry. This 6-year-old had just asked him to defend the ethics of his entire career in terms that a child could understand. Simon's mouth opened and closed several times as he struggled to formulate a response. The question was devastating in its simplicity and accuracy. Oliver had essentially asked him whether his wealth was built on others' disappointment and pain. Simon started, then stopped, completely unable to find words that would address Oliver's question without either lying or admitting to something he had never fully acknowledged about his career. Oliver continued with the relentless logic of childhood, because when I watch your show with my mum, lots of people cry when you tell them they're not good enough, and my mum says you get paid lots of money for doing that. So I was wondering if making people cry is how you got so rich. Simon felt something cold settle in his stomach as Oliver laid out the moral mathematics of his career with uncomfortable clarity. The child had essentially calculated that Simon's wealth was directly proportional to the disappointment he caused others. Oliver, Simon said, his voice noticeably strained, it's more complicated than that, but Oliver wasn't satisfied with evasion. How is it complicated? Either you get money for making people sad, or you don't. Which one is it? Simon felt his hands begin to tremble as he realized he was being subjected to the most direct moral examination of his career by a 6-year-old who refused to accept adult rationalizations. The entertainment industry is very complex, Oliver, Simon attempted. Sometimes people need to hear difficult truths to improve. Oliver considered this explanation with the seriousness of someone evaluating an important moral argument. But do you tell them difficult truths to help them get better? Or do you tell them difficult truths because it makes good television and people pay you for good television? The question was so precisely aimed at the heart of Simon's motivations that he felt physically winded. This child had just asked him to examine whether his harsh critiques were genuinely intended to help people or were primarily designed to create entertaining television that would generate revenue. Simon stood up from his chair, something he rarely did during auditions, and walked toward the edge of the stage. The cameras followed him as he struggled to process being morally cross-examined by a 6-year-old. Oliver, Simon said, his voice shaking, why is this question important to you? Oliver's answer revealed the depth of his thinking about social responsibility and economic ethics. Because my mum says that how people make their money tells you what kind of person they are, and if you make money by hurting people's feelings, that makes you a different kind of person than someone who makes money by helping people feel better about themselves. Simon felt something fundamental crack inside his chest as Oliver essentially categorized him as someone whose character was defined by profiting from others' emotional pain. And which kind of person do you think I am, Oliver? Simon asked, though he dreaded the answer. Oliver looked at Simon with those intelligent green eyes and delivered his assessment with devastating honesty. I think you might be a good person who chose a mean job because mean jobs pay more money than nice jobs. The distinction Oliver drew between Simon's potential goodness and his chosen profession was somehow more painful than a direct insult would have been. The child was essentially saying that Simon had compromised his moral character for financial gain. Simon walked back toward Oliver, no longer concerned with maintaining his intimidating judge persona. Oliver, if that were true, what would you think I should do about it? Oliver's answer revealed a sophisticated understanding of moral choices and their consequences. I think you should decide what's more important to you, being rich or being someone who makes people feel good about themselves, because my mum says you can't really be both. Simon felt tears beginning to form as this 6-year-old forced him to confront a fundamental choice he had never consciously acknowledged making. What if, Simon said, kneeling down to Oliver's eye level, someone had been making money in ways that hurt people for so long that they didn't know how to make money by helping people? Oliver considered this question with the compassion that children often show when they recognize genuine confusion in adults. Then maybe they could learn how to do it differently. My teacher says it's never too late to make better choices. Simon felt his composure completely collapse as this remarkable child offered him both moral challenge and the possibility of redemption. Oliver, Simon said, his voice breaking, what would making better choices look like for someone like me? Oliver's answer was delivered with the practical wisdom of someone who had thought deeply about how to improve the world. Maybe instead of telling people they're not good enough, you could help them figure out how to get better. Maybe instead of making people cry, you could help them find ways to make other people happy. Simon stared at this incredible child who had just outlined a complete reformation of his professional approach in terms that were both morally clear and practically achievable. Oliver, Simon said, tears now flowing freely, do you think it's possible for someone to change from being the kind of person who makes money by making people sad to being the kind of person who makes money by making people happy? I think, Oliver replied with the hope that defines childhood, that anyone can choose to be kinder if they really want to, but they have to want it more than they want to be rich. The audition that followed was unlike anything Britain's Got Talent had ever aired. Instead of performing his prepared song, Oliver led a conversation with Simon about the ethics of entertainment, the responsibility that comes with influence, and the possibility of using platforms to build people up rather than tear them down. When the episode aired 6 weeks later, it became the most watched and discussed segment in the show's history. Oliver's moral questioning and Simon's vulnerable responses sparked national conversations about the ethics of entertainment, the responsibility of public figures, and the possibility of building careers on compassion rather than cruelty. More importantly for Simon personally, the conversation with Oliver became a catalyst for examining and ultimately changing his approach to judging and his understanding of success. "Oliver didn't attack me," Simon would later say in interviews. "He just asked me to think about whether my success was compatible with my values. That 6-year-old forced me to confront the fact that I had built a career on a foundation that I wasn't proud of when examined honestly." The encounter led Simon to work with ethical business consultants and child psychologists to develop judging approaches that maintained standards while building confidence rather than destroying it. 6 months later, Simon invited Oliver and his family to visit the set during filming. Oliver, now 7, was curious to see whether Simon had found ways to be successful without making people sad. "Do you still make people cry for money?" Oliver asked with the same directness that had characterized their first meeting. "I'm learning how to tell people the truth in ways that help them grow instead of just making them feel bad," Simon replied. "It's harder than being mean, but it feels better." Oliver smiled with satisfaction. "That's good. My mum says the best jobs are the ones where you feel proud of how you made your money." The story became a landmark moment in discussions about ethical success, the responsibility that comes with influence, and the possibility of building careers on compassion rather than exploitation. Oliver's question became symbolic of the kind of moral inquiry that can transform how we think about achievement and its costs. But perhaps most importantly, the conversation demonstrated that sometimes the most important questions about our life choices come from the most unexpected sources. In this case, a 6-year-old boy who understood that how we make our money reveals who we choose to be, and who believed that anyone could choose kindness over cruelty if they wanted it enough.